Thank you, Susanna. Appreciate it. Hi, everyone. Dan Brittman. I'm a director of customer success for a AI-powered search company based out of San Francisco called LucidWorks. I am based right outside of Boston. In terms of my background, I've been primarily in the financial information space, but recently did the jump over in the last couple of years to the enterprise software. So always been really focused on customer success, account management roles, really commercial management, customer-facing type of roles is my expertise. So I will be your moderator today. Looking forward to it. And with that, why don't I pass it off to AJ?
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm AJ Fuentes Twombly. I am Director of Sales at Mobilize, which is a volunteer management SaaS platform. And as far as background, I have been in the private sector for about 10 years, working most recently at LinkedIn, financial services before that. And before that, I spent almost a decade serving in the US government. Turning it over to Amal.
Good morning, Amal Williams. I am Director of Black Accounts East for Sykes.com. My background has been traditional sales software as well as services. My side hustle is publishing technology articles on Forbes and also for Sykes Quarterly, dad of 2 children, and a renewed workout enthusiast thanks to my new tool. So glad to be here, looking forward to getting started.
Very nice. We should talk more about that side hustle. That's
interesting. It's not bad.
We hear about that stuff. All right. So why don't we go ahead and get started? And Amal, this is going to you first. So when it comes to best practices, what are the top 3 practices in your mind that are make it or break it for you?
Great question. Right. So let's do the post-COVID answer. Before COVID, I think my response would have been different. But right now, for me, it is, excruciatingly painful when you have the wrong person that you're talking to.
Yeah.
So for me, stop apologizing. There are going to be several bullets in mind, but stop apologizing for your business model. That person is either a fit for your company or they're not. And you need to be laser focused on that. Not because you don't have any time and they don't have any time and everybody's busy. That fundamentally hasn't changed. But part of your job as a revenue generating individual is helping customers understand, 1, where they are in their journey, but 2, whether or not they should be speaking to you in the first place. So when we're asked questions about what our competitive landscape is, we need to be smart about contextualizing the size of the companies that we work with, the stage along their personal journeys before they work with us. And then we also need to help them understand what the tangible benefits are in a phased approach, right? So COVID financing, funding ideas, you have to have ROI. You have to have a phased and measured approach so that you can report on your value realization so that you can keep getting budget and momentum to get further and further and deeper and wider into the organization. So that's kind of my worldview of it. I would say the other thing too that's really, really important is you want to understand whether or not you're dealing with a professional shopper. Has the person that you're talking to across the room from you, have they procured something? Do they have budget power? For example, what was the last thing they bought? Are they asking for budget? Have they been given a budget? So there are some precursory things that I think that you can do when you're having a sales engagement where you can help both people that are part of the discussion understand not only why we're here, but what's important to keep in mind if you're going to, genuinely engage in having commercial discussions. And so I think for me, the biggest pivot has been understanding who and who I shouldn't be working with based upon what they share with me as their top challenges or what their needs may be.
Yeah, that's a good answer. AJ, what's your take on that?
I think agreed so much with everything that Amal said, especially the point on the post-COVID world. I think so many things, including sales cycles, have changed. And fundamentally, the way people are doing business is very different. For me, the key is not, as Amal said, not wasting time with the wrong person.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think it's so much more complicated in this world now, considering you can't get in front of customers like we used to back in 2019, however long ago that was. So yeah, I think the reality is, it's like you really just got to make sure you're talking to the right person. Otherwise, it's time to move on. I fully agree. Maximize your time. All right, AJ, this one is for you. So very often, smaller and younger startups look for that one big whale that makes their year or their quarter. I call it whaling personally, going Captain Ahab on it. Of course, this is not a sustainable long-term practice. So how do you shift your organization to a more predictable model that does not rely on, basically landing that big deal alone?
Yeah. So I would say a couple of things. I mean, one, that big deal should always be gravy. It's wonderful if you can get it. And I think spending some time with a client where you think there is a ton of potential makes a lot of sense. So it goes back to that point we were both making earlier, knowing who you're talking to and really doing your diligence on discovery, because that's a key point. I think beyond that, I have seen that most quarters are actually made on an assortment of much smaller deals. And so I would say for me, first step is data. Harder with early stage companies, but to the extent that you can start figuring out what your close rates are, what individuals' close rates are, how long your average deal takes. Again, challenging because of what COVID has done and how much things have changed over the last, 12, 13 months that it's been for so many of us. But starting with that and then trying to be as prescriptive as possible. If you say, okay, we closed 10% of our deals, how do you back into that? How much pipe do you need to build? And obviously the key to doing that is top of funnel activity and consistency over and over again.
So it seems like you value some of these KPIs out there on people that are a little bit not transactional, that's the right way to put it, that probably have more opportunities in their pipeline rather than someone that says, hey, I pulled in the big one. Congrats, great. You made your president's club or CEO circle, but then what else you got coming, right?
Yeah. And, the reality is oftentimes the people who have brought in those giant deals are also really good at being consistent in a lot of those smaller ones. But a giant deal alone, you could get lucky. You could have a client that is handed to you, or you could have a path into that. To me, the consistency of a really great salesperson is being able to repeat the behavior over again.
Yep, fair enough. Mal, what's your take? You like the big or what?
Dan, it's funny, man. I was like, don't quote Gary Vee when you respond. No, so I was literally like, resist the urge to quote Gary Vee. So I'm a cow hunter. And so my hunter is very passive aggressive because cows aren't fast, right? And they got bells around their neck, right? So we're just, glaring at each other. So it down. So here's I'm a recovering startup person, right? So I was in startups for longer than I care to articulate. And I loved it, but I'll tell you something. After a decade of, a love, I look at business kind of differently right now, especially when I know who my customers should be. Right. So startups generally, right? Please, nobody take offense to my generalizations about startups. It's anecdotal, but the first $10 million, depending on your business model, is generally founder source. So your founder's pedigree, their network, all the fun stuff that comes into doing business. Because typically, I'm doing a lot of mentoring now because at the end of this year, I'm probably going to start angel investing. So that's kind of what I've been seeing on this side of the world now. So they do their due diligence. They have their business plans. They promise me that they're not going to call it the Uber of something or the Netflix of something, right? And they have ideas. They have their segmentation, which is awesome, right? They know who they think they can serve, and they think they understand the business problem that they can solve for, right? But the most important parts of that story, and I'm going to get to the question in a moment here, is the origins of the founders, right? The business problem that they're trying to solve, right? And then what is the business model that they're going to use, or the solutions that they're going to use to solve that business problem? So when I storytell, right, to my cows, when I'm a cow whisperer, what I say to them is the reason why we're here is because we believe that we can help companies like you do the following 3 things better than you're currently doing it today. Here's why. Or I'll make it even personal and say, here's why I joined the organization, right? What I found compelling about it was its reach, right? It's 2 top value drivers. And then the third part that I found the most compelling was I know that its target audience has budget to solve for these problems. And then the conversation changes because you sound like somebody who is trying to do business with somebody to help solve their problem. So I would say to get this right, AJ, and I know you know this, we have to convince a complete stranger, right, that somebody who wasn't there for what happened has an understanding of who was in the room and what the next steps were, right? So like for me, I'm fortunate enough to have conversations at the SOW level because I write them. But for people who are new and we're training and we're trying to onboard them, conceptually, they need to understand software as a service. They need to understand consulting services, and then they need to understand managed services at the commercial level. And if they can't do that, it's really hard to get, a lot of money from somebody who doesn't believe that you've done this before. So that's kind of my point of emphasis. When you have a defined market space, don't apologize for your business model and be hyper focused on the people that are your best customers. That's what I would say.
I like that. That's good. I would say from a customer success account management perspective, I love the big deals. They're great. The only downside is as soon as they come in, they're at risk immediately, especially if they're a little bit too big for the timing of where the customer is at. That tends to be something I deal with on a regular basis. So especially when the person, like you said, is, hey, they're not here anymore or what have you. So yeah, I personally love the more approach of kind of going after the cows and building up that barn, if you would, kind of building it from the scratch, or that, variety of animals or whatever analogy we're going to use here. I don't know. So, but yeah, interesting.
Yeah, let's ask a quick question to you, since you talked about customer success, right?
Sure.
How willing are folks these days to use customer success as a strategic asset, right? Like whenever I get in there, I'm like, hey, we're gonna have quarterly business reviews. And they're like, sure we are. So I just, what have you seen, Dan, in your role? Have you been more receptive?
Yeah, you mean from the customer level, or are you talking
about customer level? Yep.
I think yes. I think nowadays, especially in the environment that we're in, anything that you can do to align with the value of the customer, and especially if you're dealing with like more technical folks, if they can kind of highlight their success internally to the business, I think they're very willing to do that. The problem, though, is aligning all these people internally tends to be a bit of a challenge. So I think, yes, people are willing to kind of engage in that. And honestly, I would say this, as soon as you have an opportunity, or as soon as you have an account that's live, these QBR sessions, these type of like strategic engagements, highlighting success, they are a gold mine, I would say, to find new business. And the beauty is once the customer is already onboarded, you got your MSA in place, you've got a use case, you've got a champion, it's all built in there. So to start to finish, to kind of find a new opportunity in that white space, I guess, within the account is significantly easier. So yeah, I think people are willing to do it. I would highly recommend doing it. I mean, customer success, that's what we're here for, right? Like, we're here to ensure customers are getting value and that they're going to continue to renew and expand business. So yes, I would say they're willing to do it. Sometimes it's a little hard to align in this environment, but yes, highly recommend doing it. All right. Good question, Amal. I'm going to go ahead and move to the next one I got here. And Amal, this one goes to you. So how do you institute a process that's not only flexible enough to accommodate a variety of seller styles, but at the same time, concrete enough that everyone follows it? How do you enforce it, or do you enforce it?
Geez, AJ, I can't even spoil it. I don't even want to spoil it. But, how much do we love creating sales process documents for the first time, right? It's like, I typically come in where the sales process doesn't exist historically. And, without a sales process, you cannot get funding for RevOps. You cannot get funding for operational overlays because the job descriptions don't exist, right? The executive level doesn't necessarily want to own it, nor should they, right? So part of documenting the sales process is so that we can have many people look at it from their personal point of view. So how do I match or meet your selling style? I force you to have a discussion internally that exposes your lack of understanding of our business. So for example, I'll say to somebody who's new in solutions, I'll say, hey, show me your point of view across this product category, and I won't chase them. And the tenured folks that have Big Four pedigree, not they're the only place that you can find talent, they understand the kung fu. They're like, oh, Amal thinks he's being cute. Let me get my decks together, right? And I want to tell a story about, how I think we're different, right? And why my point of view is impactful to business outcomes for the people that we're trying to work with, right? So when we're looking at a sales document, my world, I always come in and I say, hey, there's 6 touches in this sales engagement. More than 6, you're not actually engaging from a commercial standpoint, right? Some people actually do just have meetings to view demos and understand the landscape to fill time in account. Those people exist. But let's assume that we're dealing with an enfranchised budget holder who has been empowered to solve a problem that as long as you can make the case for funding it. So we talk about those things. What I ask the folks that are there is I say, okay, what are we going to sell them? Pause, right? And when somebody says our market level messaging, yes, we're going to provide solutions. Yes, we're going to provide managed services. Yes, we are going to provide software, but I'm saying specifically for this customer, who else have we done this with, right? What did the beginning look like? And what was an important part of their consideration when they were trying to get the momentum needed to not only get started, but to involve other parts of the business. So a successful customer for me, you have to focus on one target across 3 to 7 lines of their business until you leave the company, because that's your job. And so what I want to understand is, do you know the names of the group vice presidents that are in charge of operations, finance, content center, supply chain, whatever those top key drivers are, right? Because as soon as I say that, guess what happens? And I always joke with guys when I first start, I go, they might say yes, and then what happens? What do we do? Like, what if we get lucky? What if somebody's just feeling charitable and they say, you know what, I got a budget, I don't want to take the next 6 calls, you were on time and you were responsive, because that's sometimes what it takes, right? And I want to get started with you. That's usually a fire drill. So what I do basically is I'm the first one, and I just document my sales calls. I say, here's who attended, here was my agenda, here's what I have to have out of this meeting. And I always ask the customer, I say, what do you have to have out of this discussion for us to have another meeting? I say my goal is for us to have another conversation after this.
Right.
I'm like, that, are you okay with that being the potential goal? What do you need to hear from me, right? Without being a salesman, right? To ensure that we can have another business discussion. And I think if we can get out of, and one of my most recent friends, right? I need 4 new friends a year. One of my most recent friends said to me, hey, Amal, you know what's great about our first discussion is that there were no slides on the screen. So I would challenge you as a sales professional, regardless of your industry, you have to be able to tell your story and share your value promise and your customer success from your cell phone, from your cell phone, from your laptop, from a napkin at the bar. After COVID, please get your shots, wear masks, right? Yeah. But you have to be able to tell that story no matter where you are. And if you can't tell that story, meaning this is how we typically start. So when you're at the bar and they say, hey, you know, pitch me, sell me something. Well, first of all, you know, let me have a drink, right? But then second of all, this is what we typically do when we have a discussion. These are the people that are involved. This is the information that I share beforehand. When we all come together, be expecting questions of this nature, right? And I don't necessarily make it say, please have this agenda, please capture these exact notes, because what happens is the person loses their identity in that conversation because they're trying to be more administrative than they are trying to do the proper level of discovery. So here's my quick joke, right? A prescription without diagnosis is malpractice. And new hires are prescribing I almost cursed. They prescribe things, right?
Hey, that's not me. Feel free.
Yeah, you know what I mean? I
don't want to talk for you.
Oh, geez, right? No, so the new hires are trying to prove to you that they know what your company does, right? And I would ask them and I would encourage them, when you are brand new, because you weren't there for the story, encourage your customers to tell you very specifically what they want and what they need. Because you can take that field level intelligence back. Hey, I'm new. I've been here less than 6 months. I'm not an expert, but I know a lot of people who've been here longer than me. What do you need to have in your gathering exercise that I can provide to you? And some of them will say simply, you know, who else do you work with that's like me? Customer just opened the door. You better know the answer to that. Right? And then whoever owns those products and whoever is the head of that solution at your organization, debrief them. Take the education, actually watch the videos and the demo videos of the solutions that they're talking about so you know what it actually means to the customer to be successful. And then come back and say, dear Mr. and Mrs. Customer, here's the next steps and the agenda that I propose based upon our lab. I can write the emails they write themselves when you know what you're doing. Here's our next agenda. Let me know if this is in line with what you expect to hear from us at the next call. Don't let that email sit there until the day before your meeting. Call that person or text them and say, it is material to the value of our next discussion that this agenda align with what your interests are. If we do not do that, we will not be successful. And that's my passive aggressive voicemail. I'm like, we're not going to be successful if this is how we continue to do business. The meetings set themselves. That was my answer.
No, it's good. That's good. And thank you for walking through that. And I actually want to kind of take that and go with a question towards AJ. You know, obviously, as Amal brought up earlier, you know, you go to these startups, you kind of formulate your brand new sales process, you document, all that, and kind of go through some of the things that Amal went through. So based on your experience and your history of kind of being in these type of situations, when you're onboarding these new hires, do you find that it's better potentially to bring in someone that's a little bit less junior, more coachable potentially, or someone that's like probably a little more experienced that, hey, like I know what I'm doing, but sometimes they're like, hey, don't put the square peg into the round hole. So what's your preference? What's your experience with hiring people and on this basically after you put this new process into place?
Yeah. So a couple things. One, I never hire in a vacuum. To me, it's about making sure that the team fits with each other. So if I have somebody on the team who's quite good at one thing, I will look for somebody to complement them. I will tell everybody who works for me and have for years that I will not tolerate any sort of non-thoughtful behavior in the workforce.
Sure.
Exhausting enough to be at work. And so working together as a team is really important. And I make that a priority. So I'm looking for people who can be team players, and I push on that a lot. I check references. I'm also looking for diverse teams because, as the data shows, the more diverse experience you have, the more diverse backgrounds you have, the higher performing those teams are. That data has come to be true over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
I would say beyond that, sort of building a little bit on what Amal said, I think process is important, and I think there should be a place for fundamental process. But I also spend a lot of time kind of talking my team, many of whom have often been very early in their careers, off the ledge. I think if you have a nervous sales leader, salesperson who is just saying, oh my God, I'm going to forget this one thing, or what if I got this wrong? They're not going to be at their best. And so what I want everybody to remember is people will do business with you because they trust you and they like you. Act accordingly. So have a conversation with people. Don't just go into your list of items, because then you're not remarkable, then you're not memorable. If you start a conversation where you say, hey, how are you in this year of COVID in particular? We all know that everybody's having, a challenging year. Get to understand not just what your customer wants on a business perspective, but get to understand why it is that they want to take your call. There's a lot of people who call. There's a lot of sellers who call. And so what I will tell my teams is, yes, there is a process. You have to get some fundamental basic information out of a disco call. There's a number of touches that it's going to take to get a sale. But if you forget something, it is okay. You can go back and reply with an email. You can make a call the next day, and people will appreciate that level of honesty and vulnerability. I think it's a really important part of doing business, and it'll earn their trust.
That's awesome. I like that. All right. Let's move to our next question. Actually, I'm going to jump in line with my questions here because I want to keep this conversation going with what we're having here. This one is for you, AJ. How do you recruit? What are the best processes around recruitment for you?
So I spend a lot of time building a bench. I think it's always important. I think that understanding who might be looking within your personal network and then sharing within that network and telling folks that you're always interested in meeting new talent is important. As I think all of you know, somebody can turn around and just say, hey, I need a change, or I'm leaving, or I got a better opportunity. So shortening the cycle of recruitment is essential because you lose so much time, money, and effort, not just in the time that a role sits empty, but also in onboarding. And beyond that, I take the diverse aspect of recruiting to be probably one of my top priorities. I need to understand that people come with different perspectives to the table. So I'm not afraid of hiring somebody who is a career switcher. As an example, I myself am a career switcher, and I've sort of gone from different industries, but fundamentally believe that so much of this is based on personal relationships. And so I will take someone who says, hey, I've worked 10 years, never been in sales, but want to go into this now, as well as somebody who's 30 years into a career or 1 year out of college. But again, my big focus really is on being a team player. It's just something I have no tolerance for. That will get you off of my team faster than anything else.
Fair enough. What about you, Amal? How do you go about that?
Let's see. Hot takes on LinkedIn and Twitter usually get a decent followership. I'm not even kidding. And I also think, a great way of sourcing talent is I think when we talk about capitalism, we are aspirational. We're not inspirational. It's different, right? Because I want the lifestyle that success affords me, right? When we say like, where you guys want to go for vacation right now? You got to leave. Don't give me the context of your lives. I know that we're parents, but like AJ, next weekend, where's vacation?
I'm going to Italy.
All right, boom. Don't even care which part of it, but that part, awesome. Dan, where are you going?
Probably going to like Aruba.
Oh, see, that's nice. Yeah, yours is better than mine. I'm going to Mykonos immediately, right? My wife. Yeah, listen, right? I take a month off, but in order to feel good about and being able to do those things, you actually have to want that thing, your goal, right? Mm-hmm. If we're talking about so one of my hats is marketing as well. Mm-hmm. My aspirations as a marketer are different. I want to publish something that's meaningful. I want to be viewed as somebody who is credible, right? And I also want to publish content that helps people understand how to get from where they currently are professionally, right, to where I think they would like to be. So that stuff for me is pretty cool. So you're going to organically get some folks that, kind of follow your brand, personal and professional. The challenge is can you fit that into what your commitments already are? So I do a lot of philanthropy. I mentor 10 students in the technological side of the school, as well as the business side of the school. And so when I pick them up, right, I basically just tell them, like, here's what usually happens when we work together. Some people are proactive, some people are reactive, some people disengage completely for whatever reason. I don't take it personally, right? But the ones that are successful, right, and I have 7 mentees who make 6 figures now in less than half a decade out of college, right? Capitalism, we have to measure it somehow. I'm sure their lives are great, but we look at, income and revenue as kind of one of those drivers. And all of them, to a brand, all went to publicly traded large organizations. I told them I thought it would be safer there for them because I think there is some value in the structure. Whether I agree with how the company does its business, ethically, of course, but if I see processes that are broken, I'll document that, share it with the person who's concerned about it, and say, here's how I think we can fix it. But if I'm looking at an organization, there are some tangible benefits to working in large organizations. You're going to get some sales training. You're going to get some consultative skill sets that you take out of that. You're going to understand reporting. You're going to understand analytics. You do want to get some of that basis, right? Because when you start the business and you do it all your own, like, they're not paper cuts, they're gashes. But if you go to a big company, they're paper cuts. The importance of being on time, right? The importance of listening, right? Yeah. The importance of being honest, like, hey, you know what? We can't do that. Sorry, right? But here's what we can do. And so when I think about the talent that you attract to you, I want to say this is with as much humility as possible. If I publish an opening at this company in the networks that I serve, with my social service and my philanthropy, the students at the university are going to apply to that job, right? And part of my job as a mentor, right, is to say, hey, you know what? I don't think that one has a really, really high technical requirement. And the reason why I think it's going to be tough for you is because you think your Siri is witchcraft. And the only way that's going to change is if you demystify technology and you, air quotes, start to fall in love with it. Everybody can fall in love with technology. They just have to actually find one that they like. So what I typically will say is, I think this track is perfect for you. You'd be a great business analyst. I think this track is perfect for you. You're one of the best developers in the MBA program, right? But I think for me personally, on this side of the business, most of my mentorship right now, people that I work with, they're my partners because I manage North American relationships with some of our high revenue generating partners. So I'm using that as my channel for mentorship and acquisition. So when we bring people over, they're probably coming through our partner channel because they understand our business model. So I've had to do that level of it. Prior to that, I typically would hire somebody that I inherited from a previous position because they were excellent. Or I'd hire a subcontractor that was used in some kind of project that helped me achieve my goal at the office. That's kind of how I do it.
Nice. I would say my experience always with recruiting, and this is just my general take, is if I can formulate some level of connection with you, especially in this environment via Zoom, in person, whatever we're doing, in this COVID era, that's the person that I kind of want to that I want to bring on board. And sometimes I'm willing to look past, obviously, some of the credentials, because sometimes, listen, a resume is a resume. That's the way I look at it, right? Like, you don't know this person until they get there. But if I can formulate a connection, then they can probably formulate a connection with the customer as well. So I always value that type of, aspect of someone's kind of background a bit more. But that's just me.
Yeah, I just want to chime in with one thing too.
Sure.
I find that a lot of people won't apply to the job. And this is particularly true for women because they don't think they have the qualifications. So I just want to call it out to say, apply for the job. Even if you get rejected, you will learn something in the application process. Take a chance because somebody might be on the other side and perfectly happy to accommodate a little less experience if you've got the grit, if you've got the coachability, and you can show that you'll deliver on it. So I think that's just an important point to share.
I love that. I fully agree with that. No matter how good the interview, how bad the interview, whether you get it or not, it's an experience that's going to be in your arsenal that you can leverage to do something later, or, or upskill yourself. I fully agree with that. All right. Let's take another look. All right. Mal, this one is for you. So in the recent shift to SaaS, actually, it should be for me. The role of customer success and renewal and expansion opportunities is coming to play a larger role. What are some of the best practices for cross-team collaboration, especially given that some people fall more under hunters rather than farmers in their approach to accounts?
That's a great question, man. That was like last week's rant on Thursday. So, how do we get a large body of individuals to have the same sense of urgency when they experience a customer milestone, right? Like, I'm fired up, like, email sent, let's meet about it next week. I'm like, we're going after Fortune 5s, guys. Like, if we get it right, anyway, I like being successful. And I just think that we have to meet more regularly to talk about what success is. What does it mean for us?
Yeah.
The CMO of the company asked me to have a meeting so I could rant for 60 minutes next Friday, which is great, right? I'm like, here's all the slides, and I pile up. I'm like, I'm just gonna write 10 bullets, and I'm just gonna talk to them about how I feel, right, and how I think we can kind of get better. So when I think it comes to sales, and I think it comes to service, my confidence as a sales professional is rooted in how successful customer service is. So when we go to the customer and RevOps is fired up, being like, hey, you know what? This is a top 5 in this industry. Like, this is who we've been looking for, right? They root for you, right? And sometimes when they leave the mic off, like, they forget to mute the mic, Morgan will be like, nice clothes. And I'm like, you know what? I smile, big smile, right? And the customer chuckles a little bit, but like, their bones crack is like, I'm like, yes, we might actually work together. I'm looking forward to this. But I think the most important part is there has to be synergy at every level, right, of the cake. Right? We can't just come together when we have a specific reason to meet because the customers can tell that it's our first date, right? So we have to find, especially in the virtual now normal, we have to find organic mechanisms to create chemistry with people that we will never meet. We onboard 40,000 employees in a year. Like, I can't have 39,000 Zoom calls.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Right? And so we have to find in our we're our micro site. We provide micro services to a larger organization. Everybody doesn't have to get along, but all of us have to have some kind of semblance of a working relationship, right? That is separate and I think more powerful than just exchanging gifts and memes, right? That's important, right? It's always so hard not to call it a GIF, right? But all my friends will judge me, so GIF and memes, because that might make you chuckle and it might, brighten your day, right? But thinking, Dan is funny or AJ has, awesome meme skills, it's not going to help us understand how we can help the customer together, right? We don't understand each other's methodologies. We don't have a common understanding of what the end game is. Here's the number one complaint, Dan. Like, I'm sure this is going to resonate with you. Sales doesn't know when to hand it over, and success doesn't even know that it's coming, right? So, like, once you land a deal, right, the interrogation starts. Like, why did they buy? I'm like, I don't know. They could afford it, right? But we have to find a way to kind of come together. So, what are the solutions? So, I think one of the solutions that doesn't work is giving your colleagues during a pandemic homework so that you can grow together. Please don't assign me an audiobook, right? I miss my thing, right? Please don't assign me a movie. My wife has the remote tonight. Not going to happen, right? And so what we want to do is we need to find organic mechanisms. So maybe it's a mobile game. Maybe it's Words with Friends, right? Maybe you guys do watch the same episodes. We used to have a movie at noon, right? Once a month, you stream a movie for 60 minutes. We don't get to see the end of it. And that was just enough. There's a shared experience in work that's not about work that can help us have an organic reason to talk to one another. Being like, the Snyder's director's cut of Justice League is, it's offensive, right? You don't get 4 hours of my life. You should have asked permission. So we need to just find ways for us to grow together. And one of those ways is if customer success, I always ask, share the agenda from your last quarterly business review with the customer and talk to me about why it was necessary. And then tell me what happens as an organization after that fact. And guess what? Everybody who's invested, right? They ask questions, and those questions become follow-up meetings, right? So we have to meet internally to have successful meetings externally. Then what does everybody say? I don't want to just meet for the sake of meeting. I'm like, sorry, it's a pandemic. This is kind of how it works. So we have to have these organic mechanisms. And I think what I like is if you have that follow-up. So like, don't wait a month to have that first meeting. Or to create a cadence, because we have to work together. Like, we should be having our one-on-ones, not because you report to me, but because I need to make sure that we're on the same page about broader things. But also I get an opportunity to learn about what you care about the most. So you have to create organic mechanisms for the people to learn how to work together. But I think more importantly, you have to find a way to enjoy working together through a common understanding of what success means to the organization.
I like that. Amal, I will agree with you in terms of your sentiment around kind of where the handoff it begins and ends with customer success. I will fundamentally disagree with you on the Snyder Cut. It's awesome. If you not watched it, take the 4 hours, find some time. That being said, I'll be done with that because I can spend the next hour long talking about that. AJ, I think one of the themes I heard from Amal's take on this is that building bonds within the team kind of creates a more cohesive unit that kind of works together and is able to, potentially mine out potentially some of these opportunities, right? What's your take on that?
I mean, I think having led a customer success team in between leading sales teams, it was a very eye-opening experience because, candidly, I thought we were such great sales partners and we were turning over perfectly well-orchestrated deals. And then I got to customer success and realized, oh, wow, this is completely different on the other side. And my big lesson learned was, leaders need to be communicating internally, processes need to be shared. And it sounds so basic and simple, but the reality is, even at smaller companies, I don't know that always happens. And so making sure that at the leadership level, you have that consistency of meetings and transparency on what processes may or may not be working. And then also ensuring that feedback is shared across both teams. It's really important to understand, hey, I can't remember which one of you raised the big deals, but how does that actually work 12 months later when the deal's up for renewal, or 24 months later when the deal is up for renewal, and what steps were taken that made it a feasible deal versus not?
Oops, sorry, my internet cut out there. No, that was good. So my take on some best practices here that I'm starting to find work really well is, man, Salesforce hygiene, CRM hygiene is huge. If from a customer success perspective, if you're putting that information in there, that's going to make my life and my colleagues' life significantly easier. So I would highly, highly recommend. I know it's annoying going there, putting the notes, getting the activities, all that stuff. You got to do it. And if you don't, then you've got to be very much willing to have that conversation with, kind of who you're handing off to. Because I think the reality is, if you think about it, customer success and sales are on kind of somewhat two ends of the spectrum, but obviously we kind of obviously have to work together. Sales, you have to retire your quota, and to do that, you got to be done. You got to move on. You can't get involved in the implementation, the support. And I get it. I fully understand. I fully agree. I want you to keep the lights on, and I'll kind of deal with all that stuff. But one of the things that I've seen that's actually been working really recently in my company is anytime a new deal closes, we do a win-loss report, and we blast it out to the entire company, and we capture that internally. We have like a database for it. So you've got all the information you need. And by the time that I'm walking in, we have a process in place as well, like right before I'm introduced to the customer, one, I'm obviously working with any of the professional services resources or sales engineering resources that were a part of the initial deal, as well as the sales director that was a part of it. And we, really get a deep dive in terms of how we got here. So, the last thing that I want to do as a customer success, professional is walk into a meeting and say, hey, tell me about this deal. Tell me about why you decided that. They shouldn't have to explain that. What I want to get to immediately is tell me what's going to make you successful. Tell me what KPIs you're after. Tell me what your future roadmap is. Tell me where you want to go. Tell me about this. We have those type of conversations. Next thing you know, if I have all that information, the hunter is going out there and they're finding their new opportunities. Suddenly I'm coming back to them saying, hey, by the way, there is X amount of new ARR opportunity here based on this because I'm dealing with that. Well, that allows you to kind of go out and find those new logos. So I fully agree that the handoff has to be in place. It has to be memorialized somewhere in the system and your CRM, whatever you're using. And any sales people out there, be extremely open to having those conversations with whoever you're handing off to. It's only going to behoove you and benefit you in the long run. All right. So let's take a look at another question we got here. I like this one. I'm going to go to you, AJ. What's your biggest no-no when it comes to organizational sales practices? Alternatively, how do you spot a practice that encourages unwanted behavior and how do you stop it?
Yeah, so I have early conversations with everybody on my team, anchoring to what I mentioned earlier. If you are a jerk, that is the one thing that will get you off of my team incredibly quickly. I don't care how much you sell. If you are unpleasant and you are unpleasant to your colleagues, I don't want to deal with you. And ultimately, there's going to be a client who doesn't want to deal with you, and you are going to be bad for business, period, full stop. So I would say, if I am seeing that type of behavior, either with colleagues, which is usually where it shows up, or certainly with clients, to me, that's a huge red flag. Typically, I spend a lot of time in that, I would say, is for people I haven't hired. Typically, in the interview process, I spend a ton of time doing behavioral questions, asking folks for examples of where they have had challenges in the past. I am shocked by some of the things that candidates have shared in interviews, unpleasant things about their current employer, just all sorts of stories. Tip, don't, blast your current employer, even if you are really unhappy. Find something pleasant to say, because obviously as an interviewer, my question is, what are you going to say when you're interviewing for your next gig? But I think there's a lot of those things that indicate how you'll be with clients. And it may sound cheesy, but I really anchor to this idea that folks will do business with you if they trust you and they like you. And that, to me, that just seems baseline. And I think, Dan, you were mentioning earlier, if you can establish some sort of connection via Zoom, that's a great first step.
Yeah, I fully agree with everything you said there. I know this is going to be a strange one. You can't exactly teach likability, but the reality is we're salespeople, right? You have to be customer facing. You have to be able to kind of connect with people. And if you're going to act like, I'm trying not to curse as well, so I'm not going to, your life don't stink internally and like you're bigger than the organization, it's not going to work.
No, it's not. And we can all teach you whatever skill, right? Like, I can teach you how to do this skill, and we can go over it, every day if we need to.
Yeah.
You can't teach some behavioral traits.
You cannot teach it. It's a strange thing. There's no class for, hey, make me like you. Maybe acting. I don't know. What do you think, Amal?
I don't know. I was gonna talk about money and then I stopped. I was like, I'm sorry, just use your inside voice, okay? That's all I'm gonna say. I'm like, if you think your personal economics is what justifies the behavior that you have, let me ask you a couple of questions. How much taxes do you pay in capital gains? You're not gonna have the answer. Do you have a 3-day work week? Can you take a year off, right? Because you're behaving like that kind of a person, and I know your answers to all of those questions are no. So what I think the most important thing is the humility, right? Like, we have people, the person has to want to give you money. They want, I want to give you this money because I trust you, like AJ said, right? But I don't want to be disgusted by who you are, right? And I don't think that people talk about that. It's like, you know what? I don't mind if Amal gets himself, an extra bottle of bread at the restaurant, right? He seems like a nice guy. So I think you have to be humble, and it can't be this fake humble, right? Where you have all these canned quips that you share to feign humility. I think you do have to be humble. And I think it's really, really important that when you talk about culture within an organization, is that we all have to find a way to work together. Like, we have to have that common understanding, right? And a lot of people are not being civil, which to me, we have company policies to handle that kind of behavior. But when we talk about what the positive behavior is, I think positive behavior is, don't make a scene on a group company call, right? What you're really saying is you'd like to have a very, frank conversation with somebody who can change your current situation. That's what you're actually saying.
Right.
So when we talk about professionalism, the professional says, dear Mr. and Mrs. whoever it may be, I need to get some time on your calendar for the following reasons. Leave a voice. If you're having a tough day, leave the person a voice note, not a voicemail. Voicemail is different because I got to go check my phone and remember it. But if you leave me a voice note on our internal Teams communicator, guess what I'm going to do? I'm actually going to listen to it a couple of times and probably be a little more engaged than I would be if I saw an email. Because when you send emails, all you get back is questions. When you send voice notes, typically all you get back is action, right? So that's a strategic way to navigate information through your organization. AJ, you look like you disagree with me. I'm kidding. So, so what I would say is, how do we deal with the different egos? Well, one, we actually are invested in your success. I know people don't believe that anymore, and it's not true for a lot of companies. There's 1,000 companies, right? Not all of them are awesome, but if you are fortunate enough to find a place that is awesome, that is rooting for your success, don't forget to tell them how new you are and say, what do we do next? You guys have been in business for 4 years. What usually happens after this? That's humility, right? Yes, you've been in sales for a decade. You're good at it. I wouldn't have taken the interview with you if you weren't. You have something about you, looks like it reminds me of somebody else who is successful, right? And so if we agree that that is the common ground that we stand on, who are you in the organization, right? And this is my favorite one, AJ. You can borrow this one if you like it. I talk to new people and I say, if the group vice president, global group vice president had a one lead, forget the vertical, pretend it's everybody's best vertical. Somehow magically 100 salespeople have one vertical of specialty, right? And we're not in pharma. We're sitting there and I say, in which order would she give that lead to you against the rest of your peers? Right? And the ones that are good, right? Rebecca's great. She says, well, there's Mark and he's awesome at this. And JJ's a rock star, right? And then she says on the second pass, well, his plate is full. And he only specializes in these two key verticals, right? That's somebody who's invested, right? That's somebody who knows that, right? Because when you're successful, you know that if you do the right things, the other stuff shows up, right? Because once you get the compensation you want, give me any business card. Honestly, I really don't care. Thanks, right? My LinkedIn speaks for my brand. But if you believe that the promise is true, like I believe in my company's vision because one, I've seen the individual parts of it be successful. But two, if we bring one or two of those parts together, we actually make more money. That's all that we have to do is just get a deal where two lines of business converge on one client, and we have a client potentially for the next 25 years, right? I believe in that, and I would do everything that I can to make sure that that's a part of my reality because I want the benefit from what happens when that takes place. But you have to know, here's the three things you have to know. You have to know the people in your organization that are impactful to the outcome, right? You have to not only understand the process, but you have to read the process documents that are part of your revenue cycle. You owe that to yourself. So you have to have those. Hey, what happens if a customer wants to do this? Well, what does the process document say? Because what do you guys say, Dan? Is there an NDA on file? Have they read the T's and C's? Who's coming to the meeting? Like, I need to deliver to y'all, right, the ingredients of what's happened, and then y'all got to help me bake the meal. And so my job, I think this is what people don't understand. And let's be specific this time. Mostly the men, because we're terrible at administration. Because we don't catalog or we don't create an allegory of the customer's journey, every meeting we have is an interrogation, right? You're exhausted. Why is Dan asking me all these questions? Because you didn't write anything down, bro. Who's at the meeting? What do they want? What is their timeline? Do we have a competency gap where we may have to actually go source some talent? When you manage it like that, the people, one, they respect you because they think, oh, wait, he's been near $10 before. But secondarily, they understand how to insert themselves based upon the processes within the organization as it currently stands. So when you exhibit administrative excellence, you're going to get the help that you need, even if it's just clarity.
I like that. I'm gonna give my one take on this, and I think it's a pretty just generic one that I've noticed that's a big no-no for me that I find is just tough to get around, is colleagues and people around me and under me that are a bit bitter about their specific situation. They just say they blame everything else on, hey, this is what I'm dealing with. Yeah, this is the environment that I'm in. You know, I read this book a while ago by, I think it's Jocko Willink, Extreme Ownership. Great book. He's like an ex-Navy SEAL. And one of the biggest principles he has in there is like, you just have to own your environment. You know, like you have to be accountable. You have to embrace the fact that like, hey, maybe my pipeline sucks, or hey, like this customer's really tough, or hey, there's something COVID's going on. We're all dealing with it. You know, you just got to embrace the challenge and just grit it out. And I find that people that are willing to kind of take that bitterness and frustration, kind of leave it at home. Listen, we all get frustrated. We all get angry. We all know how tough it is, but leave it at home. Don't bring it to work because it spreads. It spreads fast. I hate that. I hate having to nip that in the bud, but the reality is it spreads very fast, and it's not conducive to efficiency or sales or anything. So that's my one big no-no, I would say. All right. I know we don't have too much time left, so I want to kind of switch gears. Hey, Susanna, there you are. I wanted to shift a little bit to questions from the Q&A section. So one quick question, actually, Susanna, this is going to be for you. Will this be available as a recording?
Yes.
Okay.
We will post the recording in about 2 weeks, and we will email it out to people.
Very cool. That's for you, Mark. All right. Let's jump on another one here. I like this one. This is a good one. This is from Victor. How do you ensure transition of a talented BDR in your team to an AE, knowing that this transition should trigger new skills to develop when negotiating and closing? And why don't I pass that off to AJ?
I love this question because I think fundamentally every leader's role is to ensure that whoever is on their team is learning something from them. I tell my team this all the time. This may not be your favorite job you ever have, but I want you to leave knowing that you brought a new skill or got a new skill, I should say, from the experience. I think specifically with BDRs, it's about coaching ahead of time, asking folks what they want to do next. I think that's really important. Again, another practice that I have with my teams, I have typically monthly coaching sessions one-on-one. They're aside from, meetings spent directly to talk about work or pipeline or anything like that. It's really focused on career. So if a BDR wants to go to sales, then how can I get them the experience to be prepared for the next role? And specifically on this one, it's listen to client calls, maybe help close a smaller deal, do backup if an AE is out of town. So oftentimes if somebody's on vacation, but there are a couple deals that may close, maybe that's a call I take with a BDR and we close it together, that sort of thing.
All right. Amal, what do you think?
It's not fair for me to answer this anymore because like my last practical experience was, a decade ago. I'll tell you this. I'm always so selfish in my answers, but this is the most important line item in my budget. Period. The ability to have meaningful engagements with people who can, buy from you is the most important part of the sales process, period. Right? Like the funnel is a symptom of the efficacy of your business development function, right? So I think the thing is that's very important to remember is that these two roles are spelled differently for a reason. So we should assume nothing is transferable from the BDR role to the AE role, because if I'm a mature organization, immature organizations make their account executives prospect. We can argue online later. Mature organizations treat the BDR like it is an asset to be invested in, and that it is a career path that has matriculation as a part of its evolution, right? So the BDRs, why there used to be churn, is because the BDR is like, there's no way I'm going to hit my daily target, even if I don't want to. The compensation isn't worth it. Let me go try to find another job. What job do most BDRs apply for when they try to leave sales? The answer is marketing, right? And so what we need to do is we need to help them understand that business development is actually a skill. And as soon as you have a craft and there's a skill and there's something that you can take pride in, you feel like there's a part of the organization for you to grow into, right? And not all BDRs should become salespeople. I call them forever BDRs. And those guys are online doing speaking engagement for $5,000 to $20,000 around best practices. So if your BDR needs to matriculate to become an AE, I think the most important thing is that they have to understand the business model that you guys have and be able to articulate it, but also start to talk about where they see themselves in the organization. And if it is not aligned to the sales or the revenue cycle, you guys should own that part and say, hey, you know what, we're big enough and we're nimble enough to give somebody who has talent an opportunity to add value to the organization in another way. Because not all BDR should become AEs, we know this. So that's what I would say. But if you're an AE, the most important part of your skill set is your storytelling, right? Your sense of urgency, and then your ability to communicate internally, right? Forecasting and all of that should take care of itself as your organization improves and as the greater portion of your funnel is attributable to marketing spend. But your number one thing as an AE is to give me field level intelligence about our messaging, right? Does it resonate? Our revenue streams, which verticals should we stop calling? Don't tell me the lead's trash, right? Say, we probably shouldn't call utilities anymore because of their business model. They don't have enough margin to invest in companies like ours. So I think when AEs are effective, the AEs that are effective, they text their clients because they care about the outcome, right? They're informed about not only their industry, but also their company's place in it. And I think the last part is that the hardest thing for us to get good at, right? We're all talking about this, is the reporting and the analytics, right? Then if I'm not at my target number, what's the plan? It's not to wait for more leads to show up. The reason why I'm not at my target number, I believe generally, as long as your product isn't trash, is because you don't help the customer understand what types of investments they need to make with you until it's too late in the call. Stop giving 7-figure value propositions to people with 5-figure budgets. Like, your life will be better. So I think it's important for them to understand that. And I think it's important for the organization to realize that not all BDRs go to AE heaven. Sometimes they go into other functions of the organization. AE heaven, sometimes they go into other functions of the organization.
All right. And I think with that, I think we're going to have to go ahead and wrap it up because